Chapter 1. My Mother at 66. Kamla Das. Summary in English. The poet was driving from her parents' home to the Cochin airport last Friday morning. Her mother was sitting beside her. She was 66 years old. The old lady was dozing. Her mouth remained open. Her face looked pale and faded. It was grey like ash. It looked lifeless, like a corpsey dead body. The lifeless and faded face of her mother pained her heart. The old lady seemed to be lost in her own thoughts. The poet turned away her attention from her mother and looked outside. The world outside was full of life and activity. The young trees seemed running fast. The children looked happy while moving out of their homes. When they were at the airport, they had to undergo a security check. The poet was standing a few yards away from her mother. She looked again at her old mother. She felt pain to look at the colorless, lifeless, and pale face of her mother. Her face looked faded, like the late winter's noon, which had lost its shine and strength. This aroused the old familiar ache in the poet's heart. Her childhood fear overpowered her again. However, she controlled herself. She appeared to be normal. She scattered smiles on her face while saying goodbye to her. She wished to meet her old Amma again. Summary in Hindi. पिछले शुक्रवार को सवेरे कवित्री अपने माता पिता के घर से कोचीन हवाई अड्डे की ओर गाड़ी चलाती हुई जा रही थी। उसकी माँ उसके पास बैठी थी। वह 66 वर्ष की थी। वृद्धा उठ रही थी। उसका मुंह खुला रह गया था। उसका चेहरा पीला तथा मुरझाया हुआ दिखता था और राख जैसा विवरण धूसर लगता था। यह एक लाश के समान निर्जीव प्रतीत होता था। उसकी माँ का निर्जीव तथा विवरण चेहरा उसके हृदय को दुख पहुँचाता था। वृद्धा उसके ही विचारों में खोई हुई प्रतीत होती थी। कवित्री ने अपना ध्यान अपनी माँ से हटाया तथा बाहर की ओर देखा। बाहर का संसार जीवन में भरपूर तथा गतिविधियों से भरा पड़ा था। छोटे छोटे वृक्ष पीछे छोड़ते हुए प्रतीत होते थे। अपने घरों से बाहर निकलते हुए बच्चे प्रसन्न दिखते थे। जब वे हवाई अड्डे पर थे तो उन्हें सुरक्षा जांच से जूझना पड़ा। कवित्री अपनी माँ से कुछ जगह दूर खड़ी थी। उसने अपनी माँ को फिर से देखा। माँ के विवरण निर्जीव तथा पीले चेहरे को देखकर वह पुनः दुखी हो गई। उसका चेहरा उस बीतती हुई शरद ऋतु के विवरण चंद्रमा की भांति दिखाई देता था, जिसके चमक तथा शांति चुक गई हो। उसने कवित्री के हृदय में पुरानी जानी पहचानी टीस पीड़ जागृत कर दी। उसके बचपन के भय ने उसे फिर से जकड़ लिया, किंतु उसने स्वयं को नियंत्रित किया। वह सामान्य दिखने लगी। उसे अलविदा कहते समय उसने अपने चेहरे पर मुस्कान बिखेर ली थी। वह अपनी वृद्धा अम्मा से फिर से मिलने की कामना करती थी. Important stanzas for comprehension. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me. Doors open, mouth, her face as like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked. Where was the poet driving to? Who was sitting beside her? The poet was driving from her parents' home to the Cochin airport. Her mother was sitting beside her. What did the poet notice about her mother? She noticed that her mother was tossing with her mouth open. Why was her mother's face look like that of a corpse? Her mother's face looked pale, faded, and lifeless, like a dead body. Find words from the passage which mean sleep lightly, doze, dead body, corpse, felt, realized, and looked, but soon put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. What did the poet realize? How did she feel? Her mother was lost somewhere else in thoughts. It pained her. What did she do then? The poet withdrew her thoughts from her mother and looked outside. What did she notice in the world outside? The young trees growing outside went past as if they were sprinting. Happy children were coming out of their houses. Find words from the passage which mean running fast, sprinting, happy, merry, moving out, spilling. But after the airport's security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her young, pale as a late winter's moon, and felt that old, familiar edge, my childhood's fear. But all I said was, "See you soon, Amma." All I did was smile and smile and smile. What did the poet do after the security check? After the security check, the poet stood a few yards away and looked at her mother's face again. Why did the poet compare her mother's face to a late winter's noon? The late winter moon lacks brightness as well as strength. The pale and colorless face of the mother resembles the late winter. What is her childhood fear? The fear of aging and ultimate death, separation. How do the parting words of the poet and her smile present a contrast to her real feelings? The poet's parting words of assurance and her smiles present a stark contrast to the old, familiar age or childhood fear. Her words and smiles are a deliberate attempt to hide what is going on inside. Find words from the passage which mean colorless, yarn, faded yellowish, pale, pang, deep pain, age. Question from text book solved. What is the kind of pain and ache that the poet feels? When the poet sees the pale and corpse-like face of her mother, her old familiar pain or the ache returns. Perhaps she has entertained his this fear since her childhood. Aging is a natural process. Time and aging spare none. Time and aging have not spared the poet's mother and may not spare her as well. With this aging, separation and death become inevitable. Why was the young tree described as sprinting? The poet is driving to the Cochin airport. When she looks out, the young trees seems to be walking fast them. With the speed of the car, they seem to be running fast or sprinting. The poet presents a contrast, her dozing old mother and the sprinting young trees. Why has the poet brought in the image of the merry children spilling out of their homes? The poet has brought in the image of merry children spilling out of their homes to present a contrast. The merry children coming out of their homes in large numbers present an image of happiness and spontaneous overflow of life. This image is in stark contrast to the dozing old mother whose ashen face looks lifeless and pale like a corpse. She is an image of aging, decay, and passivity. The contrast of the two images enhance the poetic effect. Why has the mother been compared to the late winter's moon? The poet's mother is 66 years old. Her stricken, ashen face resembles a corpse. She had lost her shine and strength of youth. Similarly, the late winter's moon looks hazy and obscure. It took less shine and strength. The comparison is quite natural and appreciate. The smile used here is adept as well as effective. What do the parting words of the poet and her smile signify? The poet's parting word of assurance and her smiles provide a stark contrast to the old familiar age or fear of the childhood. Her word and smiles are a deliberate attempt to hide her real feelings. The parting words, "See you soon, Amma," given give an assurance to the old lady whose ashen face looks like a corpse. Similarly, her continuous smiles are an attempt to overcome the ache and fear inside her heart. Some more questions solved. Where was the poet going and who was with her? The poet was driving from her parents' home to the Cochin airport. The poet's mother had come to see her off. She was sitting beside her. She was dozing with her mouth open. The words driving and doze provide a contrast between image of dramatic activity and static passivity respectively. What does the poet's mother look like? What kind of images has the poet used to signify her aging decay? The poet's mother is 66 years old. She is sitting beside the poet and dozing with her mouth open. This is a sign of old age. Usually, old people keep their mouth open to overcome breathing problems. Her face looked pale and faded like ash. Actually, she is an image of death as her ashen face looks like that of a corpse. What does the poet realize with pain? Why does the poet put that thought away and look outside? The lifeless and faded face of the poet's mother pains her heart. She looks lifeless like a corpse. She provides an image of passivity, decay, and death. The old lady seems to be lost in her thoughts. The poet needs a distraction, a change. She puts that thought away and looks outside. There she gets a picture of life, happiness, and activity. Describe the world inside the car and compare it to the activity taking place outside. The pale and faded face of the poet's mother looks lifeless like a corpse. Her dozing with mouth wide open suggests passivity, decay, and death. Outside the car, the poet watches young trees speeding past them. They seem to be running fast or sprinting. Happy children are moving out of their homes cheerfully. They present an image of life, dynamism, and activity. Why does the poet look outside? What does she see happening outside? The thought of the aging mother at 66 and her pale and ashen face looking like a corpse becomes too heavy for the poet to bear. She needs a distraction, a diversion, and looks outside. She watches young trees. These trees speed past them and appear to be sprinting. Then she sees happy children moving out of their houses and making merry. How has the poet contrasted the scene inside the car with the activities going on outside? The poet has used beautiful images to highlight the stark contrast between the scene inside the car and the activities going on outside. The ashen face of the poet's mother is pale and lifeless. It looks like that of a corpse. She is dozing and lost to herself. The image of the dozing mother is contrasted with the spilling of children. The ashen and corpse-like face is contrasted with the young trees sprinting outside. What does the poet do after the security check? What does she notice? They have to pass through a security check up at the airport. After it, the poet stands a few yards away. Before saying parting words to her mother, she looks at her mother again. Her face looks pale and colorless like the late winter moon. She presents a picture of aging and decay. Why is the poet's mother compared to the late winter's moon? The poet's mother has been compared to the late winter's moon to bring out the similarity of aging and decay. The late winter moon looks hazy and obscure. It lacks shine and strength. The poet's mother has an ashen face resembling a corpse. She had lost her shine and strength of youth. The comparison reinforces the impact. What is the poet's familiar as and why does it return? The poet is pained at the aging and decaying of her mother. The fear is that with aging comes decay and death. The sight of her old mother's ashen and corpse-like face arouses that old familiar age in that heart. Her childhood fear returns. She is also pained and frightened by the idea, and she may have to face all these things herself. Why does the poet smile, and what does she say while bidding goodbye to her mother? With fear and ache inside her heart and words of assurance on lips and smiles on the face, the poet presents two opposite and contrasting experience. Why does the poet put on a smile? The yan pale face of the poet's mother at 66 brings an image of decay and death. It brings that old familiar fear of separation back. She fears the ultimate fate of human beings, but she has to put on a brave face. Uh, she exercises self control. She composes herself and tries to look normal. She utters the words of assurance that they will meet again soon. She tries to hide her ache and fear by smiling continuously. What poetic devices have been used by Kamala Das in My Mother at 66? The poem My Mother at 66 is rich in imaginary. Kamla Kamala Das uses the device of comparison and contrast. The use of simile is very effective. The face of the poet's old mother is described as ashen. This ashen face is like that of a cropsey. The poet uses another simile. The yan pale face of the mother is compared to a late winter's moon. The poem excels in contrasts. The old losing lady inside is contrast with the young trees sprinting and merry children spilling out of their homes. Thank you. Like and subscribe my channel for more videos. Just follow my channel and ask what chapters do you want.